Hi. I'm going to continue on the discussion of the properties of normal distribution and demonstrating how the probabilities associated with normal distribution could be calculated using Excel. As I mentioned earlier, normal distribution has very useful properties which will allow to solve real-life problems. One of the properties is 68-95-99.7 rule. Just to repeat, what does it mean? It says that 68% of population is contained within -1 standard deviation and +1 standard deviation from the mean. 95% of the population of normal distribution is contained within -2 standard deviation +2 standard deviations, and so forth. 3 standard deviation is contained by 99.7% of the population is within -3 +3 standard deviations from the mean. How we could calculate those probabilities using Excel? Well, Excel has more very useful function called norm.dist, which requires certain inputs. Excel also has other function, normal standard distribution, which basically it's a standardized, any normal distribution could be standardized to become a standard normal distribution. Standard normal distribution has mean 0 and standard deviation of 1. So with some normalization, any normal distribution could be standardized. But just to work in a real coordinate system, we are going to use a non-standard normal distribution, or just normal distribution, which will require to input the x. X is the value which we would like to consider and learn what percentage or what is the probability that random variable ends up, the normal random variable ends up being below that particular value. On the example which I worked out in my Adobe presentation, it's the Excel calculations are presented. Now I'm going to explain that example over here, so such that it will be easier for you to understand. In the example in Adobe, we have a distribution, normal distribution with mean 10 and standard deviation of 2, which could be expressed as mu equal 10 and variance of 4 or standard deviation of 2. So -1 standard deviation is gonna be 10 minus 2, 8, -2 standard deviation, 10 minus 4 is 6, and from this side, right side, plus minus standard deviation is going to be 12, plus 2 standard deviation is gonna be 14. Okay. Well, we are going to determine the distribution, the probability which is below value of 8, above value of 12, and using some calculation we will determine what is the percentage within minus and +1 standard deviations of normal distribution. Okay, in Adobe presentation, in the first example, I enter for value x is 8, for mean of the population is 10, for standard deviation is 2, and for the type, whether it's a cumulative distribution function or probability mass function, I selected cumulative distribution function. Okay, what does this mean? Basically, I ask Excel to provide me the probability that the random variable or percent of the population is less than value of 8. So Excel as an answer provided me with this chunk of the population. In terms of either probability, if we multiply by 100%, we receive the percentage. So in the Adobe part, we received 16%. It means if we have a normal distribution with mean 10 and standard deviation of 2, the percent of population below 8 or minus 1 standard deviation is 16%. Then I repeated the exercise for 12. And again, Excel provided me with the percent of the population which are less than 12 or less than plus 1 standard deviation of the population. The answer was 84%. If we want to determine what would be the percent of the population above 12, or namely above plus 1 standard deviation, either this population. So because entire distribution is 100% or 1, so by 100% subtracting from 100% subtracting 84%, we get 16% of the population is above 12 or above plus 1 standard deviations. So, and intuitively we know that because the normal distribution is symmetric, if 60% is below minus 1 standard deviation, 16% will be above 1 standard deviation. And naturally, what would be probability within minus plus standard deviation? So the answer is obvious. If outside of the this region is 16%, then 100% minus 16% minus 16% is 68%, which is confirmation of 68, 95, and 99.7 rule for this part. Alternatively, if we subtract from this probability, which is we received 0.84 or 84% in terms of percentages, this probability, we are going to get the probability of this region, which is 84% minus 16% is 68%. So as simple as that. Okay, for the calculations in Excel are demonstrated in the Adobe part of the learning plan. As a homework for or assignment for learning plan free, I'm going to ask to confirm 95% of the rule. In other words, please demonstrate using Excel calculations that 95% rule is indeed true for normal distribution. In other words, plus minus 2 standard deviation contain 95% of the distribution. This is a rounded off number, you might get a slightly different number, but don't be really surprised because of that. This is the rounded off number. So, as a hint, consider entering 6 and 14 to the Excel formula instead of 8 and 12. Okay? Okay, that was the Learning Plan free seminar. Thank you for your attention, and the next part will be Adobe part. Okay.